You're on the Bible Forum. This is an article I've entitled Silly If It Weren't So Dangerous. Comes from, the facts of it anyway, come from thetrumpet.com. The theory: people who believe they are different gender suffer much more depression and anxiety than other people. Reality: those who have actually undergone surgery, which is supposed to make them more self-actualized, suffer so badly that they are 19 times more likely than the average person to kill themselves. Think about that the next time you want to tease one of these people or you want to think funny thoughts about them. These people are living a very dangerous life. What's the solution? Some radicals in the Biden White House and across the American elite say the solution is even more transgender acceptance, promotion, education, therapy, and surgery, even on small children. Instead of looking at this and saying maybe this isn't a good thing to do, this group is saying these people would be happier if there were more of them, more people like them. That's their problem. And you wonder what planet they came from, because that's not a human thought. It appears people who argue this are unaware, or they're lying about the facts. Richard Levine was born in 1957, graduated from high school in Massachusetts, went to Harvard and Tulane, and became a doctor focusing on pediatrics and adolescents. He was married, had 2 children, sang baritone in musical theater. About 20 years ago, he would have been probably 40 years of age, he began seeing a therapist. 13 years ago, he began growing out his hair. 10 years ago, he said he was a woman named Rachel. Now, stereotypically, seeing a therapist was the start of his evolution. Not fair? Perhaps. Not all counselors are therapists, and therapists are usually trained psychologists, psychiatrists, or have other degrees in that world. They don't have a Christian worldview. It's a very secular thing. 6 years ago, he became the Physician General of Pennsylvania. I should say. 4 years ago, she became Secretary of the State Department of Health. And 6 weeks ago, Joe Biden nominated her to become Assistant Health Secretary of the United States. The confirmation hearing for Levine last week was the transgender agenda in microcosm. Senator Rand Paul questioned the nominee on whether children should be able to bypass their parents and through medical professionals' interventions and surgery try to change their sex. He meant gender. Levine his answer amounted to, quote, "Confirm me as Assistant Secretary and I'll then be glad to answer your question." This was only after Senator Paul had pointed out that genital mutilation has been condemned by governments around the world, including the World Health Organization and the United Nations. He said genital mutilation is considered particularly egregious because, as the WHO notes, it is nearly always carried out on minors and is a violation of the rights of those children. Dr. Levine, you have supported both allowing minors to be given hormone blockers to prevent them from going through puberty, as well as surgical destruction of that minor's genitalia. After Levine's evasion, Senator Paul said, "What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely that minors should not be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate their genitalia. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?" Levine would not answer. This is where the United States of America is now. In the Senate, in an official, open hearing, a man who has destroyed his gender, has been nominated to a high office by the highest office in the land. And he won't answer a question about whether he thinks children should undergo genital mutilation. And the most prominent voices in the nation are criticizing whom? The senator who asked the question. Here's how ABC News, the Daily Beast, and the Washington Post portrayed it. Quote, first transgender nominee deflects inflammatory questions from GOP senator. The question's the problem. They continue. Rand Paul launches into transphobic rant against trans nominee, and Rand Paul's ignorant questioning of Rachel Levine showed why we need her in government. End of quote. Now, there's a reason why Levine won't answer the question. And it's because transgender activists know that the less the public understands about these procedures, the better it is. The more you know about the procedures, the more appalled you're going to be. Senator Paul told Glenn Beck that his question was whether or not a child is or should be legally capable of consenting to such a drastic measure, or whether his or her parent should make the decision. But mainstream media outlets are showing themselves totally on board with the transgender movement and portrayed him as guilty of a transphobic rant. Those same children need a note from their parents when they go to school and there's something like that going on. They have to have something. The parents still have authority, but not in this area. Should children be able to decide for themselves whether to have irreversible surgical hormonal treatments that destroy their healthy body parts and much of who they are? Dr. Levine won't say, not publicly. He'll be happy to talk about it later. He'll come to your office if you confirm him as Assistant Secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services, a place where the motto is improving the health, safety, and well-being of America. And according to mainstream news executives and their journalists, if you ask the question, you're a bigot. It appears society has transformed overnight into a radical and destructive entity, at least the way they think. The Senate is certain to confirm Dr. Levine, and nobody except Senator Paul seemed to raise an eyebrow about a man who thinks he's a woman becoming chief advisor to a cabinet-level office in the federal government. While the media covers for them, members of the Biden administration and the new Congress are rapidly moving to force the transgender agenda into law. Just last Thursday, the House of Representatives passed something called the Equality Act. If it passes the Senate, which is doubtful, the same Senate that is about to confirm its first transgender person, then the law of the land will offer this guarantee to homosexuals and transgenders. And I quote, an individual shall not be denied access to a shared facility, including a restroom, a locker room, and a dressing room that is in accordance with the individual's gender identity. What they say they are. This becomes a weapon against anyone who does not fully embrace this bizarre new idea about gender. An idea that goes against biology, goes against science and the functioning of family and society that almost all human beings have understood throughout entire human history. Almost all humans? It must be all, since all came into this world the same way. The Equality Act gives the government massive power to punish, I quote, any establishment that provides a good, service, or program, including a store, shopping center, online retailer, service provider, salon, bank, gas station, food bank, service or care center, shelter, travel agency, funeral parlor, or establishment that provides health care, accounting for legal services, along with any organization that receives federal funding. You must agree that a man pretending to be a woman is indeed a woman, or the government will block you from participating in public commerce. All of this is symptomatic of an advanced stage of radical sexual rebellion that has already been working on the minds of young people for generations now. Young people who have been growing up in a society where homosexuality, pansexuality, transgenderism, gender fluidity not only have their place, but are celebrated. And these young people are getting the message. Now, as an aside, one wonders just what it is that pushes men toward being a female. Are they unable to handle all that maleness represents? Are they simply more feminine in their feelings, their manner, their interests? Something that's been around as long as people, probably. Why can't they compensate in some other way? A new Gallup poll reports that of all U.S. adults, 5.6% say they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. And that's a 60% jump in less than 10 years. The biggest part of that jump happened with something called Generation Z. Those born between 1997 and 2002. That generation saw a jaw-dropping 16% categorize themselves as not heterosexual. That isn't a change in physiology. That's a warping of mind through education. Among these young adults, that's 1 out of every 6. What was once a trickle is now a veritable flood. And all this is happening because a number of people have seriously considered themselves to be suddenly of the opposite gender. Nothing's changed about their physiology, only their feelings. Should we not seek to understand what all this is truly about before jumping into this pit? The issue has huge ramifications in every aspect of modern life. It raises not just economic questions in areas like public bathrooms, gym facilities, prisons, homeless shelters, not just educational questions like what the state is force-feeding your kindergartner's mind, but also questions about freedom of speech and freedom of religion, questions about whether you can be fined or jailed for being anything less than fully supportive of this movement, or whether you are free to live by the dictates of your own conscience. Society can't afford to accept this lightly. It needs answers. But Dr. Levin refused to answer any of the easy, obvious questions. Here's a glimpse of what this movement's all about. It pushes aside facts, truth, in favor of feelings and subjectivism. It's interested only in the power to transform society. There's a popular book written by the president of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and at the time a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, as well as the founder and editor of the Witherspoon Institute's Public Discourse. He's written 4 books and several pieces for the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and many other prominent publications. His book on transgenderism is considered an important book on the subject and a bestseller, but you can no longer purchase that book on Amazon. After 3 years, it is now in violation of their policies. The book, When Harry Became Sally, and no one knows why, and Amazon ain't talking. But here are some facts. It's a scientific fact that people are biologically male or female. It's a biological fact that biological sex comes with physiological and even mental and emotional predispositions. But science can tell you nothing about a man feeling that he is actually a woman. There's no scientific explanation for that. Trans supporters say that when a person's thinking doesn't harmonize with biology, he should not change his thinking, he should change his biology. Correcting his thinking would be bigoted, discriminatory, and wrong. Acting like the opposite gender, using hormone blockers, intentionally mutilating his genitalia or her would be sophisticated, healthy, and fulfilling in their view. It is difficult to comprehend just how many contradictions are contained in this thinking and how many lives have been destroyed.